Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, June the 18th, 2025. Today, as always, I want to look at the day's astrology and I Ching, but I also want to consider the horoscope of Ali Khamenei, the Iranian supreme leader, who is obviously under a lot of pressure at the moment with the Israeli attacks on his country. I don't have a time of birth for Ali Khamenei. I do have a date of birth, and I do think there are a few interesting things going on in his horoscope, especially from the perspective of solar arc directions. I also want to go over the fact that today there is a last quarter moon, and I just want to look at the main features of this particular phase of the lunation cycle. But before I look at all of that, I want to consider the astrology and I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, June the 18th, 2025. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time, June the 18th. And you can see that the moon is still in Pisces. At noon in New York, the moon is at 25:53 Pisces, conjunct the North Node. So moon conjunct the North Node, that is maybe telling us that it's not just a day when emotions can be emphasized, but perhaps also they should be emphasized. The sort of Pisces energy is quite flexible because Pisces is a mutable sign, and that is the right direction in which we should be going. We do have to look at things from different angles, and we have to understand the depths of human emotion. This contrasts with the South Node in Virgo. Perhaps the line of least resistance is to look at things just on the surface, to just focus on the material details because it's easier. But fundamentally, we need to really understand things at a level that is going to be fairly emotional, and we must consider the possibility that there are hidden motives and hidden subtleties, and we shouldn't assume that people are as they seem. And certainly it's not a good day for jumping to conclusions or just assuming that surface appearances will tell us everything. And the moon, as it moves through Pisces, it makes a trine to Mercury, and this trine to Mercury is probably a fairly fortunate influence. I mean, it's we've got the two communication planets in aspect with each other, and particularly it's making a fortunate aspect, a trine, and so that may facilitate subtle communications that are perhaps fairly psychic. So if you have any psychic abilities, it's possible that the moon trine Mercury is going to give them a boost, and it may be a day when our telepathic capacities can be better than usual. And then the moon moves on, and it does make a square to the sun. So moon square sun, last quarter moon. This is the moon's last quarter. The lunation cycle is coming to a close. It started on May the 27th with the new moon. We had a full moon about a week ago. The last quarter gives us a sense of something coming to an end, and perhaps the last chance to sort it out. And we have the sun in Gemini and the moon in Pisces. So the sun in Gemini is about ideas and thoughts, and we might be focusing on the brain. That's how it started. But with the moon in Pisces, we do start to realize that things are more complicated than we had previously imagined. And what seemed to be something that was in the realm of a brain may actually also be in the realm of a heart. And so we do have to balance that. And so that is perhaps the challenge that new moon on the 27th may represent. And we might also be dealing with irrationality. Things are supposed to be logical. So, for example, you think of Israel's attack on Iran, and how the Iranians are going to respond to that attack. The Iranian people, for example, there might have been an idea, a sort of a Gemini idea even, because the sun is going through Gemini. But Moon in Pisces does indicate that things are more complicated than that. You have perhaps, or Israel perhaps, has unleashed forces that it hasn't completely reckoned with. And certainly I think that the Iranian response to this attack is perhaps going to be more complicated than some people realize. And I'm not talking just about the military response, I'm talking about the emotional response and how ordinary Iranians are going to respond. It's not enough for just Benjamin Netanyahu calling on the Iranian people to overthrow their rulers. Well, if it was that simple, I just don't think it is. And then the moon's last aspect before leaving Pisces is a sextile to Uranus, and fairly gentle aspect, even though it does involve Uranus, because it is a sextile. And so moon in Pisces sextile Uranus in Taurus, one can sort of gently stir things up. And if we want to do something that's a bit different, well, I think we can, but we don't have to make a big drama about it. And then eventually the moon goes into Aries. Now, if you are in Europe, Asia, Australia, moon does not go into Aries today. But if you are in the Americas, then today the moon does go into Aries. Well, I make it actually that today's Wednesday, so Thursday, I make it that the moon goes into Aries at 8 minutes past midnight in London. So that means that if you're in California, the moon moves into Aries, this afternoon, just after 4 o'clock. I think 8 minutes past 4 in the afternoon. If you're in New York, that would be 8 minutes past 7 in the evening. So yeah, if you are in the Americas, you might experience a change late in the day as the moon does move from Pisces to Aries. And some things actually could become a little more difficult, because the moon, the moment it moves into Aries, it makes a conjunction to Saturn. And so what perhaps started off as being quite straightforward towards the end of the day does become more difficult, and certainly as you move into this evening. So if you are in the Americas and you've got something important to do, then maybe you should do it earlier in the day. But even then, the moon is late in the sign. It's made its aspect it's made its trine to Mercury. So you've got to really consider the situation. Perhaps if you really need to make an impression and you need to show someone you're serious, perhaps the moon conjunct Saturn would be late this afternoon in California, this evening in New York and the East Coast might work in your favor. But if you're not in the Americas, you don't have to worry about moon conjunct Saturn, moon moving into Aries, because that doesn't really happen until tomorrow. So here is the chart for Sydney, Australia. If we set the chart for noon in Sydney as a representative of Australasia and East Asia, you can see that the moon is earlier in the sign. It's at 17 Pisces, so really it's in the middle of Pisces, and the moon is quite making quite a close trine to Mercury. So if you are in Australasia, then this morning things actually could be quite good with the moon applying to a trine of Mercury, and you might find that it's quite easy to express yourself, and you're even picking up on a sextile with Venus. So if you've got something to say, got something to express, if you're in Australasia, then I think you can be, quite effective. But try to do it as early as possible. By lunchtime, except unless perhaps you're in New Zealand. But even then, try to get it as early as get it done as early as possible. By lunchtime, the opportunity, might be passing. And then there is finally, there's the heliocentric view, putting the Earth the Sun at the center of the solar system, and there is the Earth. Earth is at 2740 Sagittarius, so the Earth is always opposition of the Sun. So the geocentric Sun is at 2740 Gemini. The heliocentric Earth is at 2740 Sagittarius, and it is separating from a square of Saturn, which might sound like being a relief. That Sun square Saturn has been tough. We might have felt that we were under pressure, but then the Sun is making a quincunx to Uranus. The Earth is making a quincunx to Uranus. So Earth quincunx Uranus. Uranus is a planet of instability, things blowing up, revolutions, and the Earth is, us trying to make sense of everything going on down here on planet Earth. And with the quincunx to Uranus, we may feel that not everything is going to plan. And we can see that not everything is going to plan when we look around us and when we look at the news. And also, Mercury is making an opposition to Saturn. So you've got Mercury, heliocentric Mercury is at 25 Virgo, making an opposition to heliocentric Saturn at 25 Pisces. And so, Mercury opposition Saturn can bring things to a halt. We may feel that something is really holding us back, is blocking us. But then Mercury, having made the opposition to Saturn, it makes a trine to Uranus, and it makes a square to the Earth. And so Mercury is kind of bringing everything together. Remember, Mercury in a heliocentric chart is the fastest planet, because we don't really use the moon in a heliocentric chart because there's no point, because it's, from the sun's perspective, it's exactly where the Earth is. So Mercury may be asking for a way to resolve some kind of block. And it could be successful, but at what price? Given we've got that Mercury trine Uranus, something has to happen, something has to give, and that might be the answer, but that might not be the answer that we want. Though, as I always like to emphasize with heliocentric charts, they tend to represent the collective rather than the individual. So let's now move on to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. Aries. There is a contradiction here. Something doesn't entirely make sense. And, on one hand, Aries, you feel that there is so much to say, so much to express, and you want people to hear your message. And that is a natural thing that every Aries at the moment would want to do. Why keep things secret? But at the same time, part of you feels that you have to keep things secret. That if you were to tell everyone what was on your mind, then the response may not be to your liking. And it is true, Aries, that some things are just best left unspoken, and if you haven't already said it, then maybe you've lost your chance, or you had your chance and you took advantage of it and you said whatever you had to say, and now it's time to keep quiet. Isn't there that phrase when advising people, what to do if they're in a debate, isn't it? Sort of stand up, speak up, and shut up. Well, you've spoken up. People know what you believe and know what you think, and now it's just time to shut up. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you just now need to just allow things to, resolve themselves in their own way. And if you tried to really make things happen now, it possibly wouldn't work. Now, I'm not saying that you're not a powerful person. You are a powerful person. You have a considerable amount of charisma at the moment, and at the same time, you are a difficult person to ignore. Especially if you're annoyed about something, or you really feel you want something to happen. But possibly, at least in the short term, the moment for action has passed. Now, the moon does actually move into Aries today, if you're in the Americas. Now, if you are not in the Americas, then the moon doesn't actually move into Aries until tomorrow, sort of London time. The moon moves into Aries sort of 8 minutes past midnight. But, this afternoon in California, Hawaii, Alaska, the moon moves into Aries. Early this evening, if you're in the East Coast, you've got the moon moving into Aries, and you may experience a change. And I have suggested, Aries, that there are some things that you do have to keep quiet about, or you would perhaps be best advised to keep quiet about. But as the moon moves into Aries, you may feel that you can be more open, and it's not that you have to be totally open. There are still things that you need to keep to yourself, but there is more scope for revealing your intentions, or perhaps you feel that there's something that you need to sort of start work on. But do take it slowly. Just because the moon is in Aries doesn't mean to say that everything is going to start moving again, because the moon does make a conjunction to Saturn, and that moon conjunct Saturn is about slow progress. And, even if you're not in the Americas, wherever you are, the moon is moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. And this moon moving towards a conjunction of Saturn will perhaps remind you that Saturn really is now in Aries. And with Saturn in Aries, okay, it's going to be there for a couple of years. Okay, it does briefly leave Aries and move back into Pisces later in the year, but only briefly. And with Saturn in Aries, you have changed. You are becoming more serious, and you're taking yourself seriously, and it's good to take yourself seriously. As the I Ching likes to say, those that don't take themselves seriously never really amount to much. And I always think about that. It always bothers me, because I sometimes think that I haven't taken myself sufficiently seriously over the course of my lifetime. Maybe I shouldn't have been an astrologer. Maybe I should have been a lawyer or something else. I don't know. That's the kind of thought you might have. But then I'm not an Aries. Well, my moon's in Aries. But seriousness is eventually going to start to cut in, and even when the moon moves out of Pisces into Aries, you do have to ask yourself what you want to amount to, and the growing power of this conjunction between the moon and Saturn will, I think, remind you of this. Taurus. Today things are okay. I mean, it's not an especially dramatic day, and it's a day when you can quietly enjoy yourself. I think you have a chance to get on with other people. The moon is still in Pisces. The moon is still in mutual reception with Venus. Remember, Moon is in the exaltation of Venus in Pisces. Venus is in Taurus, which is the exaltation sign of the Moon. So that Moon Venus relationship is still going to work for you, and so it's going to be a good day for getting on with other people. And indeed, it's something you actually should be doing. The Moon is making a conjunction to the North Node. You don't have to do things on your own, and you don't have to sort of endlessly take everything back to your own personal subjective experience. You have to ideally make some effort to understand what people are thinking and what people are feeling, and if you can do that, then you're going to get some good feedback. And also Venus continues to move through Taurus, so you can just relate to the world very easily. I don't think that there needs to be much pressure, though the Sun is still making a semi-square to Venus, and the Sun semi-square Venus means that it's going to be difficult to entirely relax, and there's just another pressure that has to be taken into consideration. And something, it could be money, for example, it could be some detail which just spoils the fun, and you'd rather not have to deal with it, but you somehow know that it can't be avoided. So what would you do under these circumstances? Well, don't let it drag on. So if something is spoiling the fun, just deal with it. Deal with it as quickly as possible. And this might be a moment where you can take sudden action to address a problem. You don't want it to linger. You want it resolved. Ideally you want to talk to the person or the organization where the problem stems from, and you want to sort it out. And if you can be firm and dynamic about it, then I think you can get very fast results, and you can resolve the matter. And once you've resolved whatever needs to be resolved, Taurus, then you're going to find that things are moving, and that you can just continue enjoying the day. And enjoyment does matter, and ideally you'll be also enjoying other people's company. Gemini, you perhaps benefit from a trine between the Moon and Mercury. You had this trine between Moon and Mercury yesterday, but it's still there. Moon is in Pisces. It's making a trine to Mercury, which is your ruler. And this trine is easygoing, and it does allow you to talk and to be open with everyone, but also you'll be able to stick to the point if necessary. So if there is, for example, something of a material nature that needs to be resolved, then I think that you can do it. And if you want to talk about money, or something you feel that is owed to you, or something that you want of a material nature, then I think the words will run freely, and you can make a good impression. And additionally, Gemini, today is a last quarter moon, and so last quarter moon, it's an important stage on the lunation cycle. So we had a new moon in Gemini on May the 27th. It was at 6 Gemini, I think, and so that represented a new beginning. It was the Gemini season was well and truly underway, and what's happening now is that the moon is the sun is about to leave Gemini. In a couple of days' time, it will be in Cancer, and so this last quarter moon could be a moment of crisis. And, when I say crisis, I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it's a moment of decision where you might feel that it's now or never. And so with this last quarter moon, this might actually relate to some of your ambitions. You're thinking about what you've been trying to do, what you've been trying to achieve, perhaps since May the 27th, or perhaps even earlier. It may actually relate to the time when Jupiter was moving through Cancer, because Jupiter was moving through Gemini. But Jupiter did move through Gemini for a whole year, longer, I think, and then it moved into Cancer. But that time when Jupiter was moving through Cancer, there could have been a lot of promise, but you may not have felt that you were able to achieve everything you wanted to achieve. And with this last quarter moon, it might all be becoming obvious, and you may feel that over the next few days, or at the very, very latest until between now and the new moon. And of course, that new moon, when is that new moon? That new moon is the new moon is on June the 25th. Of course, by June the 25th, the sun will be in Cancer. You might just feel that there's just something that really has to be sorted out, and now might be the time. And if you want to be ambitious, even a bit pushy, Gemini, then I really think you can be. With the moon is in Pisces, it's conjunct the North Node. That is the right direction for you to be going in. Sure, there might be pressures elsewhere. Mars has just gone into Virgo, so with Mars moving through Virgo, there might be pressures at home or pressures from your family, and of course you've got to take them seriously, but you can't take them too seriously right now, because I think, Gemini, there are other things to get together. So it might be just a question of, sort it out now, because if you don't sort it out now, there is a possibility that you might have, lost the moment, or you might lose the moment. But anyway, it's still only Wednesday. It's the middle of a week. You've still got plenty of opportunities to turn the thing round, and to really start to move towards the achievement of at least some of your short-term ambitions. Cancer, it's a day when you are feeling that you do understand what's going on. It's becoming increasingly clear. It may not always have been clear, but it's now becoming obvious. And that inner realization is really just getting stronger and stronger, and you're starting to get things for the first time. And maybe you had to ask yourself some deep questions, and at first you didn't know the answers, but those answers are becoming clear, and that nothing is entirely simple, that you can't just look at the facts and then from the facts reach all the conclusions you need to come to. Maybe you don't even need to come to conclusions, at least that might be your original thought. But right now, Cancer, I'm hoping that you have a broad perspective, and that you've taken action to give yourself sufficient perspective to be able to move to the next stage. The moon is about to move into Aries. Now, when the moon moving into Aries, well, that moves into Aries could be as early as this afternoon if you're in California, or this evening early this evening if you're in New York. Okay, the moon will move into Aries tomorrow if you're not in the Americas. And so with the moon moving into Aries, it is a time to sort of get yourself together and to decide, what needs to be done. You've done your thinking, and now it's time for action, or it's very soon going to be time for action. Though, for most of us today, there's still some thinking and contemplating to do, but we can't think and contemplate forever. And in terms of a lunation cycle, we do have a last quarter moon, and so we've got a new moon coming up, and that new moon will be in your sign, so that's something to look forward to. But this is the old cycle, and it is the end of the old cycle. And so you're thinking about perhaps the challenge of taking private thoughts and private realizations and actually incorporating them into your broader philosophy. And it could be a time of philosophical change, it could be ideological change or spiritual change. When your beliefs have reached a certain point when then they're not explaining everything. And with the last quarter moon, it's about revelation, but the revelation is not about telling other people what you think. It's almost telling yourself what you think. You're aware of something on an unconscious level. You don't really want to think about it, but now it's becoming real, and you want to talk to yourself about it. And so it could actually be an important stage here of this last quarter moon in terms of your inner dialogue. And when you've reached a particular stage with your inner dialogue, it's then it's time to start thinking about the outer dialogue and what you are going to be discussing with other people, and what you're going to be planning for the future in a concrete sense. And of course, Cancer, now is a time when you need to get ready for the sun to move into your sign, because it's really close now. Already you've got Mercury and Jupiter in Cancer, so the Cancer season is certainly underway. And the final thing to wait for is the sun moving into Cancer, and that will obviously happen. I think over the weekend, and so perhaps for many Cancerians it will be a time of preparation. Leo, there is a biquintile today. Sun is biquintile Pluto, and I haven't really talked about it so far in this video, so that's something that needs to be mentioned. So this Sun biquintile Pluto, Leo, is a time for you to think about what you can do and what you'd like to do. And the biquintile is about incorporating something, and you decide that you want more power and you want more control, and maybe you want to change things, and it's your decision. You make that decision. It's not a decision that's really forced upon you by outside circumstances. A quintile is about you. It's about your psychology. It's about your willpower. And being a Leo, you're often someone who is very willful, and when you decide you want to do something, you go and do it. And this Sun biquintile Pluto should really help you. So decide what you'd like to change. If something isn't good enough, then you don't have to put up with it. And so in the depths of your soul, you can start to connect. And it happens at every level. It starts at a very deep level, a level that you're hardly conscious of yourself. But then one thing develops into another thing, and in the end, you start to be in a position where you really can have a powerful impact. And even if you're not really in the mood, part of you, Leo, would just like to be left to your own devices, to think things through in your own way. That's the way you'd like it to be, and you probably don't entirely feel you want to be disturbed, but at the same time, there's just something you have to do, and you want to assert yourself, and you absolutely can. You can really, really get people to notice you. And so if there's anything you're unhappy about, Leo, really you do not have to put up with it. And one thing going on today, aside from that Sun biquintile Pluto, we do have a last quarter moon. So last quarter moon, by definition, is a square. So the Sun in Gemini is squared by the moon in Pisces. So Sun is in late Gemini, and of course Sun is your ruler, and so Sun in Gemini from a Leo perspective, it can be about other people. It can be quite a sociable placement for the Sun, and it can be about all these people you're trying to interact with. It could be about friends, people you're used to, even if they're not friends. And then the moon makes a square to the Sun, and that is a challenging aspect. And the moon square Sun is reminding you that things are actually more complicated than they seem to be on the surface. People are more complicated than they seem to be on the surface. So you might have spent time being with people, talking to people, and you just not really thought about it, and you just taken them at face value. And suddenly with that moon square Sun, you realize that everyone's got an agenda. Everyone is concealing something. It's not that they're being consciously devious, but people are just not being entirely truthful. People are not entirely truthful. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, everyone keeps something back. And just today, Leo, you're particularly aware of how much is being kept back. And that actually could be quite a revelation. And once you realize that, with this last quarter moon, a lot of other things start to make sense. And you might just have this moment of realization when you see how things fit together, and suddenly people's actions and words make sense. And that's not necessarily going to be a pleasant feeling. I mean, the truth very often isn't pleasant, but you are now in a position of knowledge. So Leo, you should be thankful for that. You should not be in a state of ignorance. And so when you get some information, when you're able to see the larger picture, ideally you should be thankful, because that allows you to take action and to make decisions which are based on reality rather than fantasy or wishful thinking. Virgo, well, you're still getting used to Mars being in your sign. I mean, that's quite a big change, Mars having been in Leo on and off for such a long time, and suddenly Mars is in Virgo, and that does put pressure on you. And in many cases, you may be the one who is called upon to take action, and you might feel that it's your obligation to take action, because if you don't take action, no one else will. And action is not just about being dynamic. It's also about seeing what needs to be done. Other people don't see what needs to be done. They think that everything will look after itself, and things will get done all by themselves. And you as a Virgo know that is not true. And so with Mars moving through starting to move through Virgo, I think that does give you a sense of responsibility, because if you don't do something, well, no one else will do it. I mean, there's no need to panic today, because Mars is in Virgo for some time. I think it's in Virgo until the beginning of August. But that's something that has changed, and is something that you do need to consider. And you can take successful action, but Mars is starting to move towards a sextile of Jupiter, and so with Mars making a sextile to Jupiter, that allows you to make your presence felt, and in a social situation, you will get noticed, and people will listen to you. And with other people, for example, in relationships, if you explain what you want and how you want it to be done, I think the people will listen to you. So don't assume that everyone is lazy or disinterested, because they're not. maybe they're just not ready to take the initiative. They're not ready to make the first move. They'll just assume that nothing has to be done unless someone tells them that it has to be done. And that person could be you. And yeah, over the next few days, Virgo, I do think that you can be dynamic, and part of your dynamism, or rather your successful dynamism, is connected with your sensitivity. We do have today the moon in Pisces making a conjunction to the North Node, and so with the moon making that conjunction, that really allows you to understand people. It is right to make a special effort to understand people, and understanding people is not the same as following their lead or giving in to them. I mean, you have to understand who you're dealing with. Even if you disagree with them, you have to know what's going on in their hearts and their minds. And with that moon conjunct the North Node, that's absolutely something you can do, and it's going to help you as far as you achieving your ambitions. Because at the moment there are things you want to do. Perhaps ever since the new moon on May the 27th, there was that new moon in Gemini, and that hopefully really encouraged you to move forward, and you perhaps had ambitions. But today we've got a last quarter moon in Pisces square the sun. You can see what you need to do. You can see where the hurdles are, and part of those hurdles might be other people. You could say, well, people are not necessarily being as supportive as you'd like them to be, but that is not a permanent state of affairs, or at least it needn't be, because I think that you have sufficient psychological insight to understand why people are behaving in the way they are behaving, and also to be able to get through to them and to persuade them that your way is the best way. Libra, you are not in a weak position. I mean, you might feel yourself to be in a weak position, that there's nothing really you can do, that it's better to just leave it to other people and just to do what you can in your own way, and hopefully you don't cross anyone's path. That might be your view, but it is unnecessary. And if you make the effort and you believe in yourself, you certainly can have an impact. And perhaps you're still getting used to the fact that Venus is in Taurus. Venus in Taurus is such a difficult placement for Venus, if you're a Libran, because it doesn't make sense. How can you be strong when at some level you feel so disadvantaged? But you're not really disadvantaged at all. You're just in a situation that you don't fully understand, and it's a situation where a depth of feeling really does matter, and you can't just make assumptions based on what things look like on the surface. And so with Venus in Taurus, you have to realize that is who you are. You actually can be a complicated person. You can be complicated, you can be devious, you can be manipulative. Well, every Libran, well, not every Libran, a lot of Librans are actually very good at being manipulative. But if you have not been manipulative so far, maybe you need to give it another go, provided your intentions are good and honest. And Venus is still making a semi-square to the Sun, and that additionally emphasizes the difficulty there. The Sun and Venus, 45 degrees apart, they just don't have an easy relationship. But just because something doesn't have an easy relationship doesn't mean it can't be resolved. And so what you need to do is really accept the power of your own feelings, and the power, the power of your inner thoughts. And if you really want something, it can happen. But you do have to believe in yourself, and be challenged. And the challenges are coming from you. And don't be afraid, Libra, of asking difficult questions. In fact, it's a great time for asking difficult questions. And you might think you're just causing upset and people won't like it if you ask such questions, but what will happen if you do ask these questions? I think that you can really start to be powerful. So don't necessarily work at a surface level, and just instead be ready to just explore things that just in the past you tried to avoid. And also, Libra, make sure that everything is covered in terms of the key details. There are certain details which are important, and you need to feel them out. And it's the details that no one else has noticed, and they're just actually staring you in the face. And they're staring you in the face in an almost emotional way. You can feel that a detail matters. Even if you can't see it, you can feel it. And so perhaps, Libra, it is a time where you do need to trust your feelings and allow your feelings to sort of move you forward. And do remember also, Libra, it is a time when you really can make an impact. Remember, Jupiter's moved into Cancer. And Jupiter in Cancer, from a Libran perspective, is great. It is about you having the chance to be successful. And the Sun is about to move into Cancer. In fact, we've got a new moon coming up in Cancer. So, it's a time when, things can really take off for you if you give them a chance and if you believe in yourself. And perhaps what you're doing now is you're laying the groundwork for it all, or at least rather what you should be doing now is laying the groundwork for it. And so, with the right approach, you can be very successful. And also, Libra, don't be afraid of being impulsive. Sometimes you have to be impulsive. You see that something isn't right, or perhaps that it could be better, and you take immediate action. You may have your doubts. You may not feel this is the right thing to do, but once you take the action, once you perhaps catch people off guard, you will have the advantage. So actually, Libra, I suggested at the beginning of this piece that you might feel that you're rather weak and at a disadvantage. The reality is it may be the opposite. You may actually, of all the 12 signs, be strongest placed. But that means you've got to take advantage of everything, and you've got to really take advantage of who you are and really bring to bear your inner power. Scorpio, Mars is still on Regulus, by the way. It's still there. I mean, it's not exactly on Regulus, but it's close enough. So, do continue to take advantage of this. Remember, Regulus is a fixed star connected with royalty, with success, with connections, and so perhaps it's still a time when you can be in contact with important people you regard as being important, people who can help you in terms of achieving your ambitions, whatever those ambitions are. Don't be overawed by another person. You don't feel that they're just too important. You shouldn't get in contact with them because you're not at their level. That's not the kind of approach you should have. Now is a time, Scorpio, when you can still get through to people, and you can do it with great power. And you remain in a powerful position, and people will take notice of you. And if you assert yourself in a social environment, yeah, it will get noticed. It will be relatively easy. You may not feel comfortable, but if you really make the effort, you apply yourself, you tell everyone what you want, you tell everyone what you don't want, I think that you will be noticed, and in many cases, people will just get out of your way. And also, Scorpio, you have actually strong willpower at the moment. So if there is something you really want, you get it into your head that you need something to happen, you want something to appear, you want to be given something. If you feel like that, then you can make it happen in an almost magical way. But you've got to think it, and you've got to think about it in such a way that there is no doubt. It's not about faith. It's about just knowing it can happen and it will happen. And that's the way Scorpio gets results. If you're in a position where you're thinking, well, will it happen? Won't it happen? Maybe it'll happen. Well, then, of course, it won't happen. No chance. But if you are absolutely sure, 100% sure it's going to happen, then, yeah, in an almost magical way, it can happen. So Scorpio, it's very important that you believe in yourself, and that you believe that you are in some way superior to other people. And I don't mean that in the sense of being arrogant or anything, but sometimes you have to think you're superior, even if it's not true, because we're looking at things from your subjective perspective. In the end, you could argue that's all we have. All we have is ourselves, if we want to be completely existential about it. And we can't mess around with other people, follow another person's destiny. It's all about us. And so with that superiority, even if it's a very subjective kind of superiority, you can really move forward with whatever is important to you. And I know that there are things that are important to you, and it's just so important that you don't doubt yourself, and you're not a minor actor in someone else's play. You're the main actor in your own play. And that's really emphasized by the fact that we've got this last quarter moon, the moon in Pisces square the sun. And you had this new moon on the 27th of May, new moon in Gemini. And that new moon may not have been entirely easy, and it may have been quite complicated, and you may have had to deal with powerful feelings. But with this last quarter moon, the challenge is to put yourself first, to take all these feelings, to take everything being revealed, becoming conscious. It started at an unconscious level, it becomes real, and you need to make it yours. And it is about you. It's not about anyone else. And so, Scorpio, perhaps what you should be doing today ultimately is reveling in who you are, and reveling in the idea that this is your moment. You are the most important person on the planet. Okay, I know you're not the most important person on the planet, but you need to almost think that you're the most important person on the planet. And actually, that is the right thing to do. And there's nothing to be ashamed of, because if you are doing what is important to you, then everyone benefits, because you are in tune with the cosmos. Sagittarius, you're still feeling the square between Jupiter and Saturn. So we had a Jupiter-Saturn square over the weekend. And Jupiter and Saturn are slow-moving planets, and so, yeah, they might have been in exact square over the weekend, but they're still pretty close to each other. I mean, you can see if you if you look at the chart, we've got Saturn at 1 degree 26 Aries, Jupiter at 2 degrees Cancer. So Jupiter is only half a degree away, just over half a degree away from Saturn. And so that is perhaps a reminder of what is important. Saturn in Aries, Saturn having just gone into Aries, is asking you to take yourself really seriously. And as a Sagittarius, sometimes you don't take yourself seriously. You go with the flow. You perhaps listen to what other people are saying. You get involved with other people's activities. You try to be happy-go-lucky. You try to have a sense of humor, but you're the one that matters. And Saturn in Aries is quite demanding here. It's perhaps almost telling you that you only got one life. Okay, we have to assume there's only one life, even if we believe in reincarnation, and even if reincarnation is a reality. In spite of all that, we have to make the assumption that you only live once, and that might be part of it. And if you do only live once, then every moment matters. And right now, you're really able to be very serious about that, and to really look after your own interests with incredible vigor. And you're actually in a position, Sagittarius, when you can bring to bear huge amounts of power. You're not quite sure where this power comes from, but you can. And once you've made up your mind about something, you will stick with it through thick and thin. You're not going to change your mind. And because you're not going to change your mind, you're creating an energy around you, and you find that things go your way. And it's just important, though, not to have any doubts. You've made up your mind. You know what you want. You're not going to compromise, not even a bit. And because of that, in many cases, things will naturally come together for you. And it may be the case that you don't even have to have a conflict about it. You're just very clear about what you want. And if you are 100% clear, why would anyone argue with you? It would be completely unnecessary. And so another thing we have today is we do have a last quarter moon. So this last quarter moon could say something about relationships, because the new moon, which started the current lunation cycle, which was on May the 27th. So that new moon was in Gemini. It was in your opposite sign, and so that new moon may have represented a new cycle regarding relationships, and you were perhaps seeing yourself as a social being. But the crisis here, when the moon in Pisces square the sun in Gemini, is perhaps a crisis of boundaries, feeling that other people are there, but what about you? And it goes back to what I was saying. You are the most important person. You really matter. And so with this last quarter moon, it is the realization that you do have to look after yourself, and perhaps you have to establish clear boundaries. And indeed, maybe the secret for a good relationship for you at the moment is to make sure that those boundaries really are secure. They might be porous boundaries. The moon is in Pisces, but boundaries they are nonetheless, and you need to have a right understanding of what is your world and what is other people's world, and you must make sure that your own part of the world is secure and is respected. Capricorn, you don't have to put up with anything that you don't want to put up with. And if you feel that the situation is irritating, or you're not getting enough respect, or people aren't pulling their weight, then you can change it. You can change everything, and you can change the atmosphere. So do not feel that things can't be changed, and it won't take much. You just have to be very focused on how you want things to be, and in terms of the way you can communicate in a way that is quite strong, is quite powerful. The moon in Pisces is conjunct the North Node. It's sextile Uranus, and so you know what to say, and you know how to get people's attention. And so if other people appear to be ignoring you, or they don't seem to be appreciative of your priorities, that is not a state of affairs that you have to put up with. And additionally, we still have a square between Jupiter and Saturn. That Jupiter and Saturn square was exact over the weekend, but Jupiter in Cancer still square Saturn in Aries. Saturn is you, and this aspect is challenging in its own way. And you could say that Jupiter is challenging Saturn. You have to accept another person's identity and the way they are, and not least because Jupiter in Cancer might represent a person who sooner or later could be of great benefit to you. But it does work both ways. Saturn can be a restraining influence on Jupiter, especially now when Saturn is square Jupiter. And so if you feel that you're losing control of a social situation, or if someone is ignoring you, then you can change things. You can change things, and you can really start to you can assert the power of your personality, and you will be listened to. And you are someone who at the moment who everyone will take seriously. But first of all, you've got to make the effort. If you say nothing, do nothing, you possibly can't entirely rely on your own, wishful thinking, willpower. You've got to say something, and I don't think you have to say very much, because the words will come quite easily to you, especially when you've got the moon conjunct the North Node. Talking is the right thing to do. Talking about the details that matter is the right thing to do, and once people understand you, they will, I think, in most cases, oblige. And so you don't have to have some big argument. There doesn't have to be a big conflict. I think that quite naturally and organically, it's you can get your way. And also, Capricorn, if there's something you really want, if there's something that's really, really important to you, and you almost feel that it's like a matter of life and death, and you really feel that it's essential, you can get it. So don't doubt yourself. Don't doubt your ability to force things through. And it just may not, though, be as much of a drama as you imagine. As soon as you start to apply force, and I'm thinking about the force of your own will, then I think that very quickly you will see results. And really, there isn't much more to say. Though I should say that if you are an American Capricorn, then late in the day the moon does change sign. Now that sign change could be this afternoon if you're in California, could be early this evening if you're in New York, and the moon does move out of Pisces and into Aries, and that means that there is a conjunction between the moon and Saturn, and that moon-Saturn conjunction does make you more serious. That makes you a sort of a heavier influence, and you really can get noticed. But you have to, with this moon conjunct Saturn in Aries, make sure that you don't take things too far. The moon could represent another person, moon moving from Pisces into Aries, and you could be just too much, and that might represent just the force of your personality. I mean, it's good to have a strong personality, but sometimes you can take things too far. And so with moon conjunct Saturn, make sure you allow other people to have their say, and don't just steamroller them. I don't think that would be a good idea. You might not even think that you're in a powerful position if you're American, and if you're at the end of the day, but you actually are. Now, if you are not in the Americas, then that moon conjunct Saturn is not going to happen until tomorrow. But I can perhaps talk about it when I do my horoscopes for Thursday. Aquarius, there is a biquintile between the Sun and Pluto, and this biquintile might be quite important. Don't forget that Pluto is moving through your sign, and so it's making a biquintile to a planet, the Sun, which very often has a connection with other people. I mean, because the Sun is ruler of Leo, your opposite sign, and so with Sun biquintile Pluto, there is the possibility that your Pluto energy can really be noticed. Pluto in Aquarius, and you can get people to listen to you, and they can understand what you're all about, and that's important for an Aquarius. Aquarians do have a very individual way of looking at things, and sometimes it can be difficult to really tell people what's going on and what's important to you. But I think that with this Sun biquintile Pluto, you can really make it clear, and some people may just understand you for the very first time. They really get what you're all about, and they start to appreciate who you are, what you've got to offer, and why you are special. Even if we take the Sun Pluto biquintile as not being about relationships and just being about you and your creative self-expression, I think that with effort and willpower, you can really make something happen, and you can almost become your creativity, and you can get a powerful sense of what you can do. Yeah, it does require work, because biquintiles are not just things that you can take for granted. You've actually got to put the effort in, but you can certainly come over as someone who is very serious, and quite possibly you're going to be helped by the continuing influence of the square between Jupiter and Saturn. So Jupiter in Cancer is a square Saturn in Aries. This square was exact over the weekend, and it's possible that through your own reorganizations, you can actually make yourself really strong. There's something you need to just change a bit. Something hasn't been sorted out properly, and it has to be dealt with, and you now deal with it with this Jupiter-Saturn square, and you can actually deal with it with incredible power and intensity. So Aquarius, if you want to clear something out, and if you want to have a complete spring cleaning, it's not really a spring clean because it's June, but it's sort of, well, in the northern hemisphere that would be an early summer cleaning. I don't know what that would be in the southern hemisphere, but there does seem to be something seasonal about it. Maybe it's just before the solstice and what you're thinking about and what you want to achieve by the solstice. Sometimes people think that they want to get something done by the solstice or the equinox. It's now or never. Let's clear the decks before the solstice or the equinox. And so you've got a couple of days left before the solstice. And so now might be the time, Aquarius, when you really can make things happen, clear everything away, just remove things almost at the speed of light. And it's a mini revolution. And once you've created that mini revolution, by the time of the solstice, when the sun moves into Cancer, then you can take things to the next level in terms of organization, and making sure that your world fits in with your aspirations, because you really need to, you do need to clear the decks, and that's something that you should be trying to do, and I think that's something you can do, and now would be a good time to start. Pisces, the moon is still in your sign, just about. Okay, if you are in the Americas, then this afternoon or this evening, the moon will move out of Pisces and will move into Aries. But for most of the day, moon is in Pisces. It's conjunct the North Node in Pisces, and so with moon North Node conjunction, this moon North Node conjunction, you are quite focused on yourself. You should be. I mean, ideally, you would be focused on yourself. The South Node is in Virgo, and so with the South Node in Virgo, there can be temptations to worry about what other people are doing and to be overly curious about other people's small, irrelevant actions and words. But it's just trivia. You don't need to focus on that. You need to be focusing on yourself with the moon conjunct the North Node, and listening to your own feelings. The moon is in Pisces. It's an emotional placement, and it highlights your own strengths. And additionally, the moon is making a trine to Mercury. So with the moon conjunct the North Node and moon trine Mercury, it is a time, Pisces, to be putting yourself first, and you don't have to make a fuss about it. You shouldn't have to make a fuss about it. If you do find yourself being pressurized, or you find people are telling you to do something you don't want to do, well, you can give as good as you get. I think that Pisces is a planet, Pisces is a sign that shouldn't be underestimated anyway, but particularly today, Pisces should not be underestimated. If you are challenged, or you're going to be able to really assert yourself in quite a major way. And even if you're not challenged, you can get your way. However you want things to be, it can be. And so Pisces, do make sure that you put yourself first, and you certainly don't have to do things any other person's way, though. Don't forget, Mars has moved into Virgo. Okay, yesterday Mars moved into Virgo, and Mars will stay in Virgo for some time, and perhaps you're starting to feel the first signs of Virgo being in your sort of opposite house, if you like, Virgo being opposite Pisces. And so you're aware that some people are looking for attention. They want attention. They can be demanding. They can ask too many questions. They can try to annoy you. But it's just starting, and I don't think you have to worry about them too much at the moment. But if anyone does irritate you, or just tries to sort of ask you to do something you don't want to do, then right now it's going to be quite easy for you to sort of brush them off. So that shouldn't be. You shouldn't find that your pace and your flow is disturbed by other people's irritating influence. And Yeah, I mean, if you do get too close to any one person, there could be problems. They might bring their baggage with them, and they could, they could try to assert themselves, and they could try to get you to sort of move off track. But I don't think it would be necessary. So, Pisces, just keep it simple, and think about yourself and your own interests. Now, finally, I should say, if you are in Americas, though, the moon does actually leave Pisces late in the day. That would be this afternoon in California, early this evening if you're in New York. And so moon moves out of Pisces and does make a conjunction to Saturn. And that is a different energy. I don't think it's an energy that you need to worry about, but with moon conjunct Saturn, Pisces, you might, at the end of the day, if you're in the Americas, reluctantly realize that there is something of a material nature that perhaps requires your attention, and it's probably annoying. It's not really what you want to have to deal with, and if you're in that kind of situation, I wouldn't worry about it too much. And you just have to demonstrate that you are in a position of authority. Even if you don't feel yourself to be in a position of authority, if you give the impression that you know about money and that you are in the right and that you deserve something, or not just deserve something, you are entitled to it. It is yours. And if you really believe that something is yours, by the end of the day, then I think your determination, can be good enough to, get what you want, or at least start the process of getting what you want. And I'm talking about something rather boring, material, and perhaps financially. And maybe if you're tough, it might be a good time to be making financial demands, provided you're justified in making those financial demands. But if you're not in the Americas, you don't have to worry about that, because the moon is going to be in Pisces all day long. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and it's now time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 4, which is youthful folly. Now, this is a warning hexagram, and it's a warning hexagram because it's telling you perhaps you should not be asking the oracle. You've asked too many times. It says something like, I answered you the first time, I answered you the second time, third time, you're a fool. I mean, that's what the I Ching says, what it can say. And that is the great thing about the I Ching. It does kind of talk to you in a quite personal way. So it might be the case that you should just stop watching the I Ching section now, because you already know the answer, and it's not helping to just keep asking. And so maybe you should just switch to the next section where I look at the first quarter moon, and I look at Ali Khamenei. So that is one approach you can take with youthful folly. And yeah, it is talking about being foolish and being in a situation where you don't have enough experience. It might not be because you're literally a youth, but regarding the matter in question, you are quite youthful because you just don't have the experience, and that is obviously a problem. And so this hexagram, it does have 3 moving lines, so we can kind of see the progression of this folly. And we have the third line moving, and the third line from the bottom moving, and that's kind of indicating that really other people could be a problem. You're hanging around with the wrong people, and either because they're not at your level, or because you're not at their level. There is a mismatch. And so you might just feel that you're in the wrong place. And in certain situations, you might feel that you know nothing, really, compared to the people around you. And so that youthful feeling of youthful folly may be really exacerbated. You're perhaps dealing with something where you fundamentally, if you're honest with yourself, you don't know what you're doing. And you try to get help, and the people you get help from, either they know a lot more than you, and they're perhaps suggesting, well, why are you bothering with this? Do you really know what you're doing? Or you get help from people who are as good as useless, worse than useless. So any attempt to get out of the situation with other people may not help. And it just may be that one fool is leading another fool. So that is certainly a possibility. Then the fourth line moves, and it just gets worse. You just get stuck in something. You should be getting out of it. You're not qualified for it. You're feeling inexperienced. It's not going well. And you are stuck. And of course, if it's a situation you're involved with that you shouldn't be involved with, the correct thing to do is just to accept the inevitable and just get out and just to leave and wait for another day, because you're not ready for it. You don't have the experience, and you might feel a bit foolish. And then the fifth line moves. Now the fifth line is not such a bad line, and the fifth line may be a final acceptance that you don't know what you're doing. And once you accept that you don't know what you're doing, you can get help with the right state of mind. You're saying, I'm an idiot, help me. And if you take that honest approach, then help might be forthcoming. And it needn't be help from other people. It maybe you're just telling the universe you just don't know. It's over your head. And when you have that honest approach, the universe might be sympathetic. But that doesn't mean to say that all your problems are over, because this hexagram does move, and it moves to hexagram number 6, which is conflict. So one problem potentially leads to another problem, and it's just not easy to get on with other people. And you might also feel that you're the victim of an injustice, that you've been landed with a problem that isn't your fault, isn't your responsibility, and you've got a lot of things to complain about. And you do complain, but is it going to help? I mean, this hexagram is fundamentally unbalanced. You've got bottom 3 lines represent the abyss. You've got the top 3 lines, which, the very, very positive trigram, but it is unbalanced. And however positive things are on the surface, underneath things are unstable, and they're unstable, and you've got a lot to complain about. And will the thing resolve? Well, not necessarily. So where does this all lead? Well, I'm afraid I'm saying that it's not necessarily going to be a particularly good day, and it could be a very frustrating day. And so what's the best way of dealing with it? Well, I think the best way of dealing with it is to go back to the previous hexagram and accept that you're involved in something that you shouldn't be involved with. Your approach is wrong, and perhaps you should just stop what you're doing. And you stop what you're doing, and that then you don't get the kind of conflict situation that might then follow. Of course, you've got to look at the situation. I understand that there are some things you have to do. There isn't an option. But if you're doing something and you just feel that you're completely at sea, then probably it's best not to persist with it. And remember, this hexagram is only for one day. Tomorrow things are going to be different, and maybe tomorrow things are going to be better. So let me now go back to the astrology, and I just want to quickly start off by talking about the last quarter moon. So there is a last quarter moon today, and Let me just show you the chart of this last quarter moon. I mean, I think it's just important to monitor the lunation cycles, the lunation cycle, even if I don't spend much time on it, just to remind us, where we are. And so we had a new moon on May the 27th. We had a full moon about a week ago, and now today I make it at 8:19 p.m. We have our last quarter moon. The sun is exactly at 27 degrees 48 Gemini, and the moon is at 27:48 Pisces. So looking at this last quarter moon, in a general sense, it does represent the final crisis of the lunation cycle. The moon is waning, and so it's getting smaller in the sky. If you can see the moon, it's getting smaller and smaller, and this is the last chance really to make anything of this lunation cycle. Absolute last chance, because after this, the lunation cycle is really fading as it moves. The moon gets smaller and smaller, then it disappears, and then it's a new moon. So last chance to make sense of it. And so we got the sun in Gemini, and that new moon on the 27th of May was at 6 Gemini, and so the moon is at 27 Pisces, and so this lunation cycle, this last quarter moon is saying that things are not as simple as they used to be. When we were looking at things on May the 27th, when the sun and the moon were at 6 degrees Gemini, it was all about Gemini. It was all about what we were thinking about. We were trying to be logical and rational, but now we've got a challenge coming from the moon in Pisces. Moon in Pisces is actually quite close to Skeet, that fixed star associated with accidents and disasters. And so we realize, hopefully, that things are more complicated than we thought. And we can have all the clever ideas we want, but we actually have to think about perhaps some emotional realities, and also just the kind of chaos that we associate with Pisces. So that might be part of the challenge of this last quarter moon. And looking at the midpoints that this last quarter moon is on, so if we look at the 90-degree dial, here it is. Remember, on the 90-degree dial, conjunction squares and oppositions are always shown as conjunctions in a 90-degree dial. So here is the midpoint of the. Here's the new one. So what planets are on that midpoint, and so one thing that we do notice is the Mars-Zeus pairing is there with the sun and the moon. Now, Mars-Zeus as a pair is quite violent. I mean, Mars is, of course, a violent influence, and Zeus is a planet of explosions and gunshots. And given what we know about what's going on in the world, whether it's in the Middle East or in Ukraine, or perhaps somewhere that hasn't exploded yet, maybe it's Sudan, but it's we're living in dangerous times, and the principle of Mars-Zeus can be gunshots. Just to give you an idea about what Alfred Witter says in Rules for Planetary Pictures, what is the principle of Mars and Zeus? He says Mars and Zeus, he says, to heat, to fire, to burn, shooting flames, danger of fire, incentive creative work or forced creative work, creative activity, leading activity, procreation, technical science, machines, military techniques, officer, firearm. And so, that gives you an idea. Also, moon on the Mars-Zeus midpoint. Remember, in astrology, the moon represents the people. And so moon on the Mars-Zeus midpoint can be, he says, is the excited populace. whereas the Sun on the Mars Zeus midpoint is the man who works energetically, the machinist. Injuries by torch flame or by firearms. And so I think there is something quite warlike about this last quarter moon, because it is on the Mars Zeus midpoint, and additionally it's on the the new moon is relatively close to the North Node and Jupiter North Node and the Saturn North Node midpoint. I mean, maybe it's not exactly there, but you see Jupiter, there's that Jupiter-Saturn square represented as a conjunction. So, I mean, I'm not quite sure how close it's. I think it's close enough. And so, that may say something about other people, our contacts, and Jupiter-Saturn, Jupiter North Node is about fortunate contacts which come easily. Saturn North Node is about contacts which are more sort of difficult. So it could be very much stop-go for many of us in terms of our social life, in terms of who we meet up with and who we don't meet up with. But I think that what's most important is the fact that it's on the Mars Zeus midpoint, and additionally, the Sun and the Moon are making semi-square sesquiquadrate aspects to Venus, and you can see this because on a 90-degree dial, the Sun and the Moon are opposition Venus, and so that opposition Venus means that Venus is also on the Mars Zeus midpoint, and you could say, well, Venus is the planet of war, the planet of victory, so again, that Mars Zeus could be an important feature, maybe of today, maybe of the next week, in the run up to the to a new moon. But again, we know this already because we know there are several major conflicts happening in the world, and Mars Zeus is going to just perhaps make things worse, make things more difficult, more intractable, and more explosive. It's difficult to think about peace talks when there's a fresh incident, when something is blown up, when another missile lands. That just makes people more angry. And it's also about gunshots, potentially assassinations, but explosions. And so it does give us an idea about perhaps this last quarter moon. Though if one wants to look at it from an alternative view, well, you should say that in astrology you should not look at one single factor. You should be looking at confirmation from elsewhere. So maybe I'm reading too much into the new moon aspecting the Mars Zeus midpoint, but I do think it does say something about the times that we are living. Now, one thing I did notice about this last quarter moon is that this last quarter moon is at 2748 Pisces. So, what is the relevance of 2748 Pisces? Well, okay, it's quite close to Skeet, and it's the accident and disaster fixed star connected with actually accidents at sea, but it's also connected with the moon at the time of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December 21st, 2020, and you might think that is obscure. So why is this important? Well, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction took place December 21st, 2020. This is what we're in. We're in a Jupiter-Saturn cycle that started on December the 21st. It's like the new moon. I've talked about the lunation cycle, but there's also the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, and we perhaps should be looking at aspects to the original Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And so the moon in Pisces, you could say that's the people, how people are going to be responding during that 20-year Jupiter-Saturn cycle, and the fact that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, in a way, has its lunar return with this last quarter moon. Let me just put the two charts side by side. So we put the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the middle, and then we put the last quarter moon on the outer wheel. You see, there is there's a moon, there's the last quarter moon at 27:48, and there's a moon at the time of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 27:53. And so, this may say something about popular response, what people are going to do, how people are going to respond to the overall situation that we're in. It's not just about war zones, it's about people being dissatisfied. Remember, people are dissatisfied everywhere. It doesn't matter what the country is, whether it's the United States, whether it's France, Germany, Britain, Iran, Israel, whatever it is, people are not happy with their governments. And so maybe with the last quarter moon being exactly on the moon of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December the 21st, 2020, this is going to really bring that dissatisfaction out into the open. And finally, I want to look at the horoscope of the supreme leader of Iran. And clearly he's someone who is in the news. I'm not sure if he's officially the head of state. I assume the head of state of Iran is the president. I may be wrong on that. But he is the most important person. Iran has its own way of structuring its government. Iran is it's a very complicated society politically, and people in the West sort of say, oh, it's a dictatorship, people don't have any freedoms, but it is more complex than that. They do have elections. These elections, the candidates might have to be vetted, but it has its own political system. And Ali Khamenei has been supreme leader since 1989, because Ayatollah Khamenei died earlier in 1989, and then in 1989, and then I think on April the 19th, so August the 19th, 1989, Ali Khamenei did become the supreme leader. And so he was born on April the 19th, 1939. And so here is his horoscope, and he almost certainly has his moon in Aries. So you can see at noon time in Mashhad, where I think he was born, the moon was at 24:25 Aries. So I suppose it's possible if he was born right at the end of the day that his moon could have been in Taurus. But I think in all probability he has both his sun and moon in Aries. So you could say sun, moon in Aries. This is quite a dynamic thing. He is someone who wants to take the initiative, and he likes to do things his own way. He's got quite a fiery chart with those four traditional planets in Aries. He does have Saturn in Aries, and so it is quite a Saturnine chart. I mean, the moon is probably at some level conjunct Saturn, and of course we do have a moon. We do have a moon Saturn conjunction in a couple of days' time, and so that might have an impact on him. And Saturn in Aries is not the best place for Saturn to be. Saturn is fallen in Aries, and so Saturn, you could say that Saturn in Aries is an authority figure. He likes to do things his way, and it's quite a difficult authority figure because it's fallen, and Mars is starting to make a square to his Saturn when he was born, so there is a sort of Mars-Saturn feel to him, but there is a sensitivity as well because he has a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. I mean that Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Pisces it's great, and this makes us think, what is Jupiter about? We often think about Jupiter as being a planet which is free and easy and maybe even open-minded. But Jupiter as a planet is quite moralistic. It's a religious planet. Can be. And clearly Ali Khamenei has religious beliefs, very strong religious beliefs. And maybe the reason for that is because he's got Jupiter in Pisces, maybe even Jupiter in Pisces conjunct Venus in Pisces. But with that Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Pisces, probably he's sort of luckier than average, although we shouldn't forget that he has just had Saturn crossing his Venus and Jupiter, and at the end of the year, if he's still alive at the end of the year, if the Israelis haven't dropped a bomb on him, Saturn will be going stationary pretty close to his Jupiter. But it must have helped him in terms of climbing the political system and getting to be supreme leader. And so he would have been 89. So he would have been only 50, is that right? He would have been 50 when he became supreme leader. And to be supreme leader, that strikes me as being quite young. I mean, you think about, the popes. To be pope, you often become pope, when you're in your 60s or even your 70s. Although Pope John Paul II was in his 50s, I think, when he became pope. Those are a few thoughts about his chart. One other thing about his chart is that he has Kalasarpa Yoga. So Kalasarpa Yoga at the time of the snake. And there is his north node, there is his south node, and all of his personal planets, all of his traditional planets. Remember, Kalasarpa Yoga, when you're trying to work out whether someone has got Kalasarpa Yoga, you don't look at Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, or asteroids, or Chiron. So there's his nodal axis. So all his traditional planets are on one side of his nodal axis. And so that means he has Kalasarpa Yoga. And if you've got Kalasarpa Yoga, we don't know what house his Kalasarpa Yoga is impacting, because there are different types of Kalasarpa Yoga depending on houses, but we don't have a time of birth. But, with Kalasarpa Yoga, it is all very fated. It was fated for him, presumably, to become supreme leader and for him to be supreme leader at this particular time. And so maybe at the moment people who have Kalasarpa Yoga are going to be particularly impacted, because right now, if we look at the chart for today, right now we have Kalasarpa Yoga at the moment. I mean, so for the next let's get this right. There is Kalasarpa Yoga. The moon has just crossed the north node. So for the next 2 weeks, there will be Kalasarpa Yoga. And so he has got Kalasarpa Yoga. Of course, Donald Trump also has Kalasarpa Yoga. So the next 2 weeks for Khamenei, the impact of that Kalasarpa Yoga is really going to come about. This is perhaps what he was fated for. And don't forget, the moon is about to make a conjunction to Saturn, and Ali Khamenei, he does have moon conjunct Saturn at some level in his horoscope. Now, I did look at his transits at the time of the attack, when that attack started. I didn't actually find anything particularly noteworthy in his transits, but just to show you, this is I've taken the time and the place for when Israel made this announcement about the attack on June the 13th. But I didn't see anything especially dramatic. Of course, Saturn has just gone into Aries, so this is the beginning of his Saturn return. And of course, his Saturn return, he won't have his exact Saturn return, I don't think, until next year. I don't know when is Saturn at 21, maybe even 2027 is his Saturn return. Hold on, I should tell you when his. So that won't be for a bit of time, but let's just check. 21. Yeah, I think he has his Saturn. He actually has his Saturn return in 2027, but it's just starting. But there's nothing absolutely exact there, and so Mars is sort of moving to a trine of his Sun. I mean, it's a trine, not a square. But Mars can be effective, when it makes a trine. It's not just about squares. So, I didn't see anything that spectacular in his transits, and that's often the case. One shouldn't just look at transits and think that transits will give you everything. Okay, you might notice that Pluto is pretty close to his true black moon Lilith, but Pluto is not exactly on his true black moon Lilith. But it was the directions that I thought were quite interesting. His solar arc directions. So he's coming up to, he's born in 1939, so that means he is he's well into his 80s, and so if we add sort of 80 degrees to, hold on, so he was coming up to, he's just had his 86th birthday, I think, so he's still going strong, and so if we move everything in his chart 86 degrees, 80 something degrees, so here's his solar arc directions, and so there are some solar arc directions we really need to be thinking about. You see, Ali Khamenei has in his horoscope a Sun-Pluto square. So Sun in Aries, square Pluto in Cancer. So, we can track this Sun-Pluto square. As it's so exact, he will get a Sun-Pluto direction at the same time as a Sun direction at the same time as a Pluto direction. So his directed Sun, or rather his progressed Sun as well, is at 21 Cancer. And so he has his Saturn at 21 Aries. So he has got his progressed Sun is square his Saturn. And so that is a difficult aspect. And then his directed Pluto at 21 Libra is opposition his Saturn. So his Saturn is getting hammered, and we know that his Saturn is fallen. So it's not a very strong Saturn. I mean, it's a Saturn that is. But hold on. Let me rephrase that. I should have prepared this chart more. His Saturn does have some strength, because his Saturn is in Aries and he's got Mars in Capricorn. So Ali Khamenei has a mutual reception between Mars and Saturn. I mean, it's quite a gritty, grinding mutual reception, but I think we really do need to look at mutual receptions in astrology. They can rescue a bad situation. And so you could say that Saturn is quite strong, and that mutual reception has allowed him to just keep going as leader. And now we have that directed Sun-Pluto square hitting his Saturn. So his authority is under a huge amount of pressure at the moment. And we know this. You don't need astrology to tell you that. And so there's Pluto opposition his Saturn, and then there is Sun square his Saturn. Additionally, his directed Saturn solar arc directed Saturn is at 14 Cancer. In other words, his directed Saturn is starting to move towards an opposition of Mars. So again, that puts him under a huge amount of pressure. That really does put him under pressure. And so I'm not saying on the basis just of these directions that his leadership is about to end, that the Israelis are going to succeed in killing him. I don't have a time of birth. I've not asked any horrors about it, but that would be cause for concern if you happen to be Ali Khamenei's astrologer. But I somehow don't think Ali Khamenei has an astrologer. I don't think astrology is looked at too well by clerics in Iran. And one other chart I wanted to look at was the day in which Ali Khamenei became supreme leader. So he became supreme leader on August the 6th, 1989. And so, August the 6th, 1989, on that date, Mars was at 1 degree Virgo and Jupiter was at 1 degree Cancer. Now, that is really interesting, because this is the chart of his leadership. When he became supreme leader all those years ago, and now if we look at what's happening now, Mars has just gone into Virgo. Jupiter has gone into Cancer. So the supreme leadership chart has just had its Mars return and it's had its Jupiter return. And I would have thought that is highly significant. And look at his Jupiter. He's got Jupiter opposition. Jupiter was opposition Uranus. We think about Jupiter opposition Uranus as being an aspect about freedom, wanting freedom, but it can be very willful and it can be quite revolutionary. And so with Jupiter hitting that Jupiter-Uranus opposition and him having a Mars return, and of course Mars is then going to make a conjunction to Mercury. So he's got Mars-Mercury in that chart for when he became supreme leader. I don't have the time when he became supreme leader. You can see that things might have come full circle, and I would think that Jupiter return plus the Mars return must really be having an impact. And it does indicate that his perhaps his leadership is coming to an end, but that doesn't mean to say that Iran is coming to an end, or at least the current regime is coming to an end. But I'm not saying it is coming to an end because I don't have a time of birth, but you can read into it what you like. But I just think it is highly significant that the leadership chart has a Jupiter return and a Mars return, pretty much exactly at the same time. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Ali Khamenei. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.